My name is Andrew Westover, and I'm the Keith Haring Director of Education and Public Engagement here at the New Museum. Hello, hello. We are glad you're here today. I join you today from the unceded land of Lenape people, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging and paying respect to Lenape people and elders and ancestors, past, present, and future. And on behalf of the New Museum, I am glad to welcome you to tonight's conversation. This will be a program that includes artists Barbara Wagner and Benjamin de Burca, and it's in conjunction with their exhibition 5 Times Brazil, curated by Margot Norton, Alan and Lola Goldring Curator, and Bernardo Mosqueira, ISLAA Curatorial Fellow. Both curators will join the artists for tonight's conversation. I would particularly like to thank Education and Public Engagement staff members, Austin D. Bose, and Derek Wright, as well as the entire New Museum team for their help bringing this program together. I'll now share brief background information about tonight's featured artists. Barbara Wagner and Benjamin de Burca are film and video installation artists who live and work between Recife, Brazil, and Berlin, Germany. They have held recent solo exhibitions at the Institute of Contemporary Art in Boston, Kunstball Stavanger in Norway, Temple Bar Gallery and Studios in Dublin, the Brazilian Pavilion of the 58th Venice Biennale, the Stedelijk Museum, the Perez Art Museum in Miami, and Museo Jumex in Mexico City. Their work has been featured in recent group shows, including Manifesta 13 in Marseille, the Institute of Contemporary Arts in Singapore, Solar dos Albraxis in Rio de Janeiro, the Toronto Biennial, and several others as well. They have also been included in the Berlin International Film Festival, the Tel Aviv International Documentary Film Festival, among others. And I hope I join you tonight in very much looking forward to this program. And of course, thank you to our supporters. New Museum public programs are generously supported by the Bowery Council, and digital initiatives are supported by Hermione and David B. Heller. We also thank our members and supporters like you who help make these programs possible. I encourage you to learn more about upcoming public programs on our website, newmuseum.org. And now, without further ado, I'll turn the conversation over to this evening's moderator, Margot and Bernardo.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And thank you all for coming tonight. I'm really excited to be here today with Bernardo, who co-curated the exhibition with me, and Benjamin and Bárbara. It's a very exciting moment. It really was an honor to organize this exhibition, which I know is your first exhibition in New York and first survey, which is really exciting when we were developing this exhibition together to not focus on one work or the new piece, but to bring together these works in dialogue, which we'll speak about later. So the conversation will be an hour. At about 45 minutes, we will then open it up to questions from the audience. We're going to focus a bit about their background and then kind of delve in more in depth into the new piece that's premiering in our exhibition, Fala de Terra. So we'll leave some ample time to speak about that work as well. So we are going to have a bit of an informal conversation, but I wanted to actually start just at the beginning, where these conversations often do, and to ask Bárbara and Benji if you don't mind speaking a bit about how you met and started working together. Take it away.
Thank you, Margot, Bernardo, Benji. It's a pleasure always to be together to talk about the works. After all, we just finished installing the show. It was a lot of work too. We are very happy. It's now maybe the first day that we can actually relax. And for those of you who didn't visit it yet, it's on the 3rd floor. The 5 films we made in Brazil were there. We have so many people to thank for this to be possible. But I'd like to begin saying that here in this room today, we have Camila Goulart, who is here with us. She helped us conceiving this installation. Without her being together with us here, we wouldn't have been able to develop a piece in parallel with developing this exhibition with Margot and Bernardo. So there's a new film upstairs, Fala da Terra, we were developing while Camila was in Brazil, very close to us. And Margot and Bernardo, thank you, Camila, for being here today. And we have the presence of Pedro Sotero, who is our main collaborator throughout the years. We have been developing films together. We have Pedro as the cinematographer. Pedro is the one who brings a whole the very human understanding of what it is to make cinema, but he also understands very well where we are when we are in Brazil, where we come from, and he bridges also a lot in between what I do when I am working as an artist in Benji. So Pedrinho, it's a honor for us to have you here. This exhibition is very much also about your vision of so many things. So thank you. I hope you can also contribute a little bit later when the questions come about. Another thing that I would like to say is that we had planned to be here today with Alan Leite, who is one of the protagonists, like one of the main actors of the most recent film, Fala da Terra. Vitor Gorgulho, who is actually here present, he is representing the Instituto Inclusartes that in Brazil with Francis Reynolds was really invested in bringing Alan here. Unfortunately, even though we had all the documentation that was proving he would come here with complete support, that he would present the work together with us here in the new museum, invited by the museum. His visa was denied twice, and we are very sorry he cannot be here tonight with us. We will make sure that the voice of these actors, activists, is also present during the program. We are thinking about making it possible through a conversation online later in September. I am Bárbara Wagner. I work very much as a journalist or a mediator. I don't really think that I know much of cinema or theater or music or dance or any of this, or performance, or these things that we have like somehow been doing together that you can see upstairs. But I am very curious and I'm very attentive to what's happening now in the now, and I am very I don't know, I'm intrigued about what is that we can do within the familia. So I like the idea that we are working with conventions, that we are talking about or through popular traditions, say, for example. There's a lot of this like terra batida, this like, where you have been. I think people have already been there. I like being there where people have been. And I think Benjamin helps me questioning or revisiting this space that I have, where I have already been.
Yeah, I think that's great. And when you were talking, when you mentioned Pedro as well, it reminded me of how Pedro, when somebody asked, I don't remember exactly the question, but they asked, how is it to be, or what's the best thing about being where you are in terms of your career, in terms of making films as a DP, as cinematographer? And Pedro answered that the best thing was that he could afford him to work with his friends, and to develop with his friends in the circuits and work with other people. So Pedro won't just select necessarily the highest budget film, but the one that will bring, interest to him as well. It's not always about making a lot of money. Only joking. But I think that goes for all of us a little bit. And cinema is really, really fantastic for being able to develop all these different types of relations with so many different professionals, both in behind and in front of the camera, and learning, learning a lot. Well, everybody learning a lot, I guess. And yeah, this is a really, it's a privilege, So I'm also thankful for that.
Margot is going to bring
go
us
back to the question. No.
Yes,
I mean,
how we start.
Yeah,
how we met.
like I mean, I know you both come at the practice from different ways, from journalism, as Barbara mentioned, and from fine art, is what Benjamin's background is in. But then also, yeah, like how, if you could talk a little bit about how you met and then how your process developed in terms of when you started working together.
Great. I don't know exactly what happened. In my photojournalistic practice, I was already trying to develop some form of having this exchange with the sitters, with the people I was looking at when I was working for newspapers, and I was curious about having an education in the arts, but not necessarily having to study art history. So I was looking for places, and in Brazil, I couldn't afford studying in the southeast of Brazil. I am from Recife in the northeast. I asked a lot of people around where I could go to, and then I had the luck of meeting Vandaling van Oldenburg, who wrote a beautiful text that is in the catalog the museum is publishing now on the occasion of the show. Vandaling is a Dutch artist who works with film and occasions to think about the colonial history, the past that Holland has in common, say, for example, with Brazil and Indonesia, Suriname. She was in Recife. I assisted her, and that was when, in 2008, I thought, I can be an artist too. If working within or as an artist is like very much investigating or setting in motion research with actual people, with actual reflection and thinking on reality, then I can also do that. I was really like, it was discovering a new world. And she said, come to the Netherlands, study in the Dutch Art Institute. Maybe you're going to find some nice people. And then I met Rito Style and Phil Collins. They were my tutors in those years, 2009, 2010. Then Phil was very close to Benji. We met through Phil Collins in those years, and then we started to be very close. I was in Berlin then. A couple of years later, Benji came to Brazil with me. We were then a couple. We were in a relationship as in people that love each other and want to be together, not necessarily working together. For a couple of years before we met Pedro. And then we started to work together, and then we are now this strange family. That was 2012 when Benji came to Recife. Our first work is actually took the shape, the format of a book that's called Edifício Recife. We can talk about it anytime soon. But 2012, Benji moved to Brazil, and we were then in between Brazil and the northeast of Brazil and Berlin, sometimes Ireland, where Benji is also from. But 2012, 13, 14, those were years when Benji really felt like he could spend time there. In 2015, we made the first film, that's Feinski Vai, the one you see in the monitors. Our first collaboration with Pedro, and the first work we showed publicly, this one, where Edson is starring Edson Vogue. That's his name, Edson Vogue. You want to talk? Do we have a different version on how we met?
No, it's the same version, but different perspective. In terms of how we met and how we had different practices, and when we came to Brazil, both Barbara and I had our urges to make work as you do, and we assisted each other in making these works. You know, we were first of all, I suppose you could say we're more of a merger than a collaboration. I never would have found myself in making collaborations with other artists before that. So we merged into one, and I think through that merger we discovered that actually we shared an awful lot in terms of in terms of maybe what we felt was necessary to talk about. Only we would fight about it until we realized that we're both fighting about the same thing. We're just getting to the same point from different perspectives, and I think Pedro was really quite fundamental in mediating our points of view and our interests to come to one singular form or one distilled form of language, which then incorporates all three of our perspectives. You know, there's the journalistic, let's say the artistic, or interest in collage, and then the interest in cinematography, and how the three of them culminate into one language is where our work is kind of situated. I think a merger. I don't know. It was kind of nice. I think when Bárbara and I met, it was a lot. It was love and exciting, but then working together was another form of love or something else. So we separated in that respect, but we kind of made most of all of our work from that point on. In fact, the majority of our works is made from that 2015 onwards. So yeah, it's another form of love.
Amazing. Well, I would like to hear you talking a little bit about methodology. We've talked about that a lot in the past months, actually. Since the very beginning, you've been making works that deal with other people's perspectives, like in Edifício Recife, first with people's perspectives about art, and then later from Cinema Cassino on with the perspective of other artists. Once you told me that that your works, as you've been like engaged in so many major projects one after the other, kind of back to back, and sometimes more than one at the same time, you've mentioned that those works, they happen almost like chapters or like stages, like as if one would be an essay or a rehearsal for the other. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about what you learned from, I don't know, Cinema Cassino to then Faz Que Vai, and then from Faz Que Vai to Estás Vendo Coisas.
It's quite interesting. In fact, sometimes it's hard to know until you have some hindsight, to see how these processes were so integral to each other. How it's hard even until today to separate the process of and research of Faz Que Vai up to and including Swinguerra, even though there's a span of 6 years or so between them. And even so, Cinema Cassino, which is a proto work, you might say, because it was before we were working with the cinema as a conceptual tool for collaboration, for dialogue. We were making it ourselves basically, and it is a synchronized 2-screen film involving dance. So when I reflect on that and Swinguerra, I think, well, we just kind of, we're coming around in full circle again in many different ways. But although the subject matter might be very, very wide, let's say. I lost my thread.
No, methodology. It's interesting because I don't know. I think I can share that with you also. I mean, whoever works as in art with this strange thing, precarious thing that is to work, to be an artist, you never really know the importance of what you're doing for someone else. Maybe you have the feeling that is urgent. That no, nobody's doing that. So why? And then you go do that. But I think it was a very intuitive thing. No, I can imagine for me, for example, that, and that was funny because I think I'm not sure if it was in this process of our conversations for the catalog, but I have the feeling it was that we had to answer something about that, and it has to do with the 2 dimensions, like to working in the world of 2 dimensions, And I think this is where I come from as a photojournalist. It has this thing in a photograph now that it's there, it's still, and yeah. Where do you go from there? I am so interested in understanding how that has an expansion to the space of 3 dimensions, and the other way around. And I think the first work we made has a lot to do with that, because frevo is something that's extensively photographed. It actually became a form that is well known by the photograph of the dancer of frevo in cartilhas, in books, educational books, in the dictatorship in Brazil. The Ministry of Education and Culture together, they had these frevo schools all over the city of Recife, and it became important to bring frevo to this level of something that we have to protect and value. So the steps of frevo were photographed then. Frevo, frevo comes from ferver, which is boil, or to boil. Frevar is to boil on the ground. So it's like to be dancing, as if everything is really hot on the floor. And it comes from capoeira. So in the beginning of the 20th century, we have carnival, like the military bands in the streets of Recife, and the capoeiras opening up space for these bands. And these capoeiras are ex-slaves. So we had slavery into the very, very end of the 19th, to the big part of the beginning of the 20th century, until today. Maybe in Pará we have, unfortunately, this problem of a kind of late slavery. In many ways, frevo is considered something that is very much about resistance, because it was like the frevo coming from capoeira, from the slaves being freed at that time, and then 70 years later, it becomes something that is a value in the state of Pernambuco. In 2010, 11, 12, it becomes then a heritage of UNESCO. We were interested in understanding how people like Edson, then Rian, Bruno, and Chana, already, Eduarda, who came to perform Dançou em Guerra, were performing something that had to do with then, the end of the 19th century. How is that? Frevo is something that is then done for the camera in the 70s, because the steps were being cataloged. And then instead of doing a capoeira on the floor in 3D, which is a kind of fight or opening up your way into the streets, then you do that for the camera, like smiling. You are now making it very clear for the photographer to see your hands, your feet, like the jumps in the air. So we wanted to see that in the 2000s, again, in relation to other forms of dance. So when these dancers that are the children of a generation that was accessing technology and consuming, so we are already in the Labour Party years in Brazilian economy, everybody was having some more access to buying. These kids, let's say, were having access to mobile phones with internet, and they were learning K-pop, voguing, and electro, and all that, as much as they were performing the frevo schools to dance during carnival and get some money. And then, of course, in their bodies, they were having to manage these different knowledges, and we wanted to photograph that, but then we wanted to see that move, and we needed the music to carry that. In the 4 portraits we made in Faz Que Vai, there's a lot that has to do with how us, Pedro, then with the camera, can follow this idea that before the camera there's a body that is challenging, no, being captured, becoming rigid, or I think the whole film is about transit, faz que vai means it seems that it goes, but it doesn't, or it feels like it goes, but it doesn't. A state of imbalance, maybe. And I think that was the beginning of our work, but also the beginning of a new moment in Brazilian economy and culture in many ways. All the other works have to do with this generation or this idea of moving up in life in terms of class, ascending through the work within the art. So I think from Faz que Vai, that began with tradition, or the tradition of frevo, or even the idea of folklore, we then move into music production in Recife, and then traditions becoming some more pop, or something that you can consume on YouTube and Instagram, and that's when we made. I see you moving there.
There's some.
That's when we made Estás Vendo Coisas.
But Faz que Vai is probably the most essential film I think we made, because it really is an exercise around the study of the 3 dimension of improvisation and the 2 dimensions of a frontal presentation, and we tried as much as possible through edit and through filming to represent the portraits of these individuals who practice frevo, but also dance to electro and voguing and have other interests. So the combination of these 2 dances was really what we worked on through a good month of rehearsals with them, to see who they are, or where they are when they're voguing, and where they are when they're dancing frevo. And I think anyone in Recife who grows up with this tradition and sees it all the time, they'll recognize frevo, like that is frevo, but it's also not frevo. It's something in between. When frevo became a cultural heritage of the humanities, or the immaterial heritage of the humanities, it's like a stamp that crystallizes something. So we all automatically prejudge it as something that's something from the past, but we stop to look at present. We stop to look at these constant refashioning as really valuable in terms of where we are today, in terms of what these differences are, So someone might have one foot in a tradition, a very strong tradition, and one foot in a
also
pop language.
different ideas of resistance, because being a Brazilian journalist, photographer, and then it's like frevo being performed during Carnival, and then the photographs that advertise the culture in Pernambuco, for example, that have maracatu, frevo dancers everywhere, like all the more traditional forms, indigenous Afro-Brazilian forms performed during Carnival only and celebrated during Carnival only. And then these are real people, and they have like real lives and real work as artists too. So we started to then investigate that, but it is about updating an idea of resistance too. So why does resistance then look only like a frevo dancer in a book from the 70s, as in like in connection to the end of the slave trade, and then you see a generation that's struggling to survive as workers in the arts. This is resistance, even if they are on stage during Carnival, in a Carnival that is documented for YouTube channel in 2015. But that is resistance. I think this is what we started to do, like to go into places that maybe artists in the visual arts or film were not really going, because these are artists that are very much on our faces. They are everywhere. I mean, if you are in the streets of Recife, you listen to their songs everywhere. The music videos are everywhere. So you see them, like the nightclubs and the churches are everywhere. So there is this thing of them not being a subculture. They are not ghettos, We are talking about main culture and mainstream culture. But then perform there in the northeast of Brazil. And that's interesting, because in some respects, even though our works are very specific, they bring a lot that can be shared, I think, in a city like New York. I think this is something we are very curious about also.
This is reminding me of something really beautiful that Pedro said, actually, to call you out there. We were together in the galleries the other day, and my next question I wanted to ask about the title of the show and the kind of bringing together the Brazilian works. And I thought it was so beautiful. We were sitting in there, and we were in Swingueira, which is this next work here, and during a quiet moment there, we heard a little bit of gospel singing from Terremoto Santo, which is this piece here. And Pedro was saying how it was like a moment sometimes when you were filming Swingueira or another piece that you could almost hear the gospel singing in the background. And I was thinking about how all of these works together are kind of coming at this idea of Brazil from like a different place, or the culture from a different place, but also existing simultaneously. And I think it also is something that is, really not necessarily anticipated, but in the installation it was coming out how much these things are also just so much a part of everyday life and the landscape where you are filming and with the people that you're filming. And I was and so I know that this show, you filmed. It's important to know that you filmed in many different places, not just in Brazil, but had a piece in Canada and Ireland and Germany. And for this exhibition, we wanted to bring together these works that were made in Brazil. So I wanted to ask, what is it for you to bring these works together, and specifically in this context and with this title, and how that resonates for you in this moment, kind of thinking about what's happening in Brazil now?
I think it's interesting to also understand this moment also here and in the new museum. Margot has been in conversation with us since 2019 for what this exhibition is, but in the meantime, we have Bernardo join the team of the museum. Bernardo is Brazilian from Rio de Janeiro, with already an interest in our work from before, and it's really nice when we got this opportunity to also be in conversation with him, who could again give a different perspective, like from Brazil, from Rio de Janeiro, from where you are, from your own practice to what we do there in the northeast of Brazil. And Bernardo and Margot suggested thinking about these 5 pieces, which are the 5 pieces we made in Brazil. Actually, we had 4 before this show. Fala da Terra was made while we were developing so we were basically promising the 5th work in the last 6 months. But still, maybe their proposition for this 5 times really made us commit. We really needed to have this 5th piece. 5 times Brazil comes, for those who are more acquainted with Brazilian cinema, it borrows actually this structure of the 5 times is a reference to 5 times favela, 5 vezes favela, work from Cinema Novo in 1962. There were 5 filmmakers who composed a feature film, each of them making a separate independent short film that composes 5 vezes favela, and which is a film that at the time was presenting then those who were then looking at a reality that was not their own. So looking at the favelado, so the perspective of those who were the filmmakers, very, very thinkers, intellectuals that were then making a whole reading of Brazilian social scape at the time. Then Cinema Novo and or the manifesto of Glauber on hunger is so unfortunately contemporary right now. I mean, it is crazy because it made me really think about the whole work of Fala da Terra connected to agrarian reform is so much like bringing back the whole conversation again. No? So it is interesting how, even after Cinco Vezes Favela, there was Cinco Vezes Favela por nós mesmos, five times favela by ourselves, and made, I didn't watch this one, it was made by people who were actually acting, no?
And directing and filming and everything.
But then they directed, but they were then actors, let's say, from the favela that were then making their own version, like reclaiming a different perspective, let's say. Cinco Vezes Brasil is then this show that we make now in 2022, a year of elections in Brazil, and a year in which we are facing like this crazy drama of having to really look again at the state of Brazilian agrarian situation. So when it's unfortunate that this film is so straight to the point, we didn't know so much would be being discussed in this mandate of Bolsonaro now in relation to the Amazonian region, to mining, to the indigenous land, so to violence,
to assassination.
Exactly. So it is something we could never predict, even though it has been happening forever in that area. No, but Cinco Vezes Brasil is maybe a beautiful suggestion to the audience to think that Brazil is so vast, so complex. There are so many ways to speculate on these identities or these positions. Nah? Who is where? Who are we in relation, or where are we in relation to those we are portraying? How does this get resolved, if it does ever get resolved? So these are very interesting questions. But it also suggests that it can go on, no? There's 5 times, but then I feel like Benji said, that each of these works are actually part of the same research. It's the same people. I keep seeing the workers on the land, the educators of MST, of Landless Movement, Landless Workers Movement, as the ones in Brega also surviving through the art, and then the ones in the church, the ones dancing in the areas of sugarcane plantation. So it is a beautiful understanding for us, also for ourselves, to see that the research is actually one with these different perspectives, because people are engaged in different practices, and they are mainly different from us. So we are also learning with them a lot. No? 5 times.
Yeah, I think that's probably the reason that the title was so good. Bernardo suggested it when we were struggling for a title, and also the reason, like Bárbara said, we worked to make this final film, which we had kind of started in terms of desire and research, and then with the invite to show in the museum, it gave us exactly that impetus to make it within quite a limited time, but it's an important moment, an important work, and an important development for us, because we hadn't worked with theatre and dialogue and on the same level as, say, the other films, which are much more about the script of music and what can come from that. But yeah, I think mine and Barbara's practice is somewhere in between the 5 times Favela, which was made by white film school of different class, talking about a place that they didn't experience, but talking about it with a lot of sensitivity, I guess, as well, and a lot of humanism. And then the second series, which is made by people from the favela, from the entire crew to cast, and because we work in collaboration and in a very kind of fundamented in collaboration in terms of working with making a portrait of the people that we're working with, or creating a portrait of them that they too would find humanist, let's say, or accurate. That's where we're somewhere in both of in between these two, 5 times Brazil. But yeah, like Bárbara said, it's a suggestion that this is the only 5 works we've made in this time, and maybe it would be infinite. There's an infinite possibilities because Brazil is huge and complex. So yeah.
And there's desenho canteiro. If Fala da Terra didn't get ready in time, we would show desenho canteiro as the 5th Brazil.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because a little bit like how we make our films, how they're all connected. Edifício Recife and Desenho Canteiro and a few other works that we made in context of one exhibition, they're connected as one little nucleus, kind of a proto-nucleus to...
Of course. Yeah, before we dive into Fala da Terra, I would like to insist and go back to the idea of this methodology of collaboration that you've been developing. Because I think this kind of ethics that you've been developing, for me, is very central to your practice, and it has a lot to do precisely with this tension or distinction between Cinco Vezes Favela and Cinco Vezes Favela Now by ourselves. Because this methodology of collaboration kind of creates a very generative, beautiful confusion between self-representation and representation, but also between the idea of fiction and the idea of documentary language. So I would really like if you could give maybe some examples in the works of how you engage your collaborators into this project of precisely creating this confusion as a methodology.
I suppose we talked about it a little bit, and we've talked about it before, but there's sometimes things that happen in the film which are best as kind of markers to describe these processes of collaboration, which make it more easier to see, I suppose. And I think in the first film, being the first portrait, which is of Alice or Hian, who hated the idea of, because we wanted to undress the drag queen Alice. I mean, not undress. I mean, that sounds wrong, but it was to the complexity of these two characters was related to Hian, the frevo dancer, a tradition from Olinda, and Alice de Menezes, who's the drag queen that is also his personality.
This is the first film we made, Faz Que Vai, no?
Yeah, and it's the first portrait of the sequence of 4. So she would never want to take her hair off, or on camera. And then we developed with her, also with Pedro, how to make a split screen of having the two people on screen at the same time. So it was really complicated on set. We're like, it's on that side, now we have to film, because we have to create a digital split and understand how that can work. It's very complex, but actually it's very simple in the end.
No, the thing is that if I remember well, for that film, we were the 3 of us getting together for the first time, with first the 3 of them, and then Chana joined after a while. But we created this kind of study group on frevo, and then what are the frevo outfits, what are the frevo schools, what are the frevo steps, and what's the difference between this and that. And we started Pedro started to film them in these meetings. But when we started to think like, how wonderful it would be if, so Benji was describing the drag and the frevo dancer. That is the same artist. Alice was a drag queen at night in a nightclub that doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. A kind of a voguing ball kind of club in the city center in Recife. She would perform as Alice, a drag queen at night, and during the day, she was like a male frevo dancer. So there was this gender thing that was really beautiful, but also when he was dancing as a frevo dancer, there was a lot of the performance of Alice there, and the other way around. So when we were watching she perform on stage, on both stages, we were then scripting for the film, and then we thought, okay, the drag can then take the wig off, and then another step comes up, and then you do something else with the heels, and then the high heels, and then she was like, no way, I'm gonna take my wig off on camera. You better like create a way, like make an effect, so I am duplicated, so I can be Alice here and here and there. So this is an example of how then the whole thing is created. So that portrait, it was her, it was them who actually defined this the existence of these two characters from beginning to the end. So with Edson, for example, he could never repeat his choreography. So he was dancing to Madonna all the time. We were filming him. We produced a soundtrack, a Frevo soundtrack on the same BPM to fit his the tempo of his dance. But every time he would perform to the same track, he would create something else. So it was interesting how in the film we were trying to edit in different ways. So Hiana and Alice, and it is double, and then there's Edson that is doing a voguing in a one take only without any cut, and then there is Bruno there's a lot of repetition of the gesture. He jumps once, but then we get him jump the same jump like twice and three times. The Frevo umbrella arrives in his hand like twice. Also, there's a whole study on what it is, dance for camera and gesture, and editing as a gesture also for that. And then finally Chana doing this, looking at you constantly as this female body that is also challenging being the object of the gaze and so on. But they do what they want to do, and we do what we can do. Then Diana, who is the singer in the second film, there was a moment we were asking them, how do you want to end this story?
What are we going to do?
Where do we go? Because we decided to talk about, let's say, to create like the industry of Brega inside a nightclub. So the whole film is shot in a nightclub of Brega music, in which they like a balcony where the audiences became the studio for them to rehearse the lyrics, and then the dancing became the backstage for them to get dressed, and then the stage is where they record the music video. But then in the scripting, there was this moment where Pork, the MC, the hairdresser, he says, right, it comes to the end of the film and I am this hairdresser who becomes then an MC, who it is the real story of Pork. And then he's like, when I'm there and Vito, Italo and Vito are there filming him, so they are actual video makers of Brega music videos who we invited to be part of the film. When they are there, once they are there, they can as well like make the video for me. And then we recorded a music video for Pork, and he begins like the music video there. It is online with his own song. And then when he asked Diana, what do you want to do? She was like, I don't want to be a Brega singer for the rest of my life. I actually would love to get out of the nightclub and get into this onto the firefight, my firefighter's truck, because she is a firefighter singer. And then in this moment I'm like, fuck. And then Benji and Pedrinho are like, yes, let's find this firefighter truck. And
now we know how to finish the film.
So, and then there's the whole thing. She gets out, and then she's all happy because she can actually do whatever she wants. And
we don't
these
know.
are examples.
We don't know so often don't know exactly how the film is going to tie together. I mean, we have to take these risks because it's a portrait, like, so it's a snapshot. It has to be fresh and made kind of, the decisions made during the process, which can drive a lot of people in the cinema industry kind of crazy, like, what do I do? But as well, I mean, like with the first film, it has a percussive sound, a percussive soundtrack, and this was another level because we filmed with, in some instances BPM, or some instances with Madonna, but it was all very much related to the tempo of the dance that they were performing, whether it be a composite of Madonna and Frevo, it's like 120 BPM, and if it's Swingada and Frevo, it's 140, almost 150 BPM. So we brought these films with the metronomic relationship after we edited to the Orchestra Popular, the Bomba da Remeterio, which is a very good old school frevo outfit. There's a lot of brass instruments in frevo, and we kind of reduced everything down to just the percussive section. So four guys then had to watch the video and interpret the scene themselves. So they're creating that extra layer based on the image rather than the other way around. So it was really a nice practice for them too, to understand how to.
In Swingera, for example, the group Extremo, they were about to have a competition. So what they do is compete in the city Extremo. In the film, we also have La Mafia and the Malocas. They are groups that participate in competitions that are held once a year in different areas of the city, but once a year. So they prepare the whole year, they rehearse. So we met them exactly in 2018, exactly before they would compete in April 2019. So 1 month before Venice. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Venice opened in May, and they were rehearsing for their competition, not for Venice, of course. And then we were just that lucky to meet them, and they were like doing this choreography of like honoring the Brazilian flag. Right. We couldn't believe that. And then they didn't have the outfits done. So one of the things was that, okay, we can do that. Because they do produce their own outfits every year without having exactly the means for that. They do it themselves. And so we said we can produce that with an actual costume designer. And Rita, her name, Rita Azevedo, has collaborated with us like a lot. And it was very beautiful how she made the whole exchange with them. And they were very curious about what it is, costume designer for cinema. So we were learning with her how to do the research. She was showing some sketches, and everybody was like, yes, sure, this color is great. Yeah, like this, yeah. And then after a while, I'm like asking the choreographer, so are you sure everybody's really happy with that? He was like, yeah, sure. We're going to use that for the film, for sure. But for the competition, we might change a little bit this and that. And then this day I called Rita, like, we have to redo everything. We have to do exactly what they're going to use for the competition, because then we know it's exactly right. And then we came to this costumes that they then made together with Rita, again, a little bit more confident that we were actually doing what they wanted, you know. It's really beautiful, but that is very much part of the methodology. It has to be theirs. As today, someone was asking us, like, what about Fala da Terra? What about that text? And then we said, yeah, it's a play they made. They finished this play in the end of last year. We saw a poster of the play being advertised in the MST channel, and they were presenting this play in schools in
Is that the
Pará.
first time that you knew about them?
Exactly. I mean, we were doing some research, having conversations with members from they're super organized, and they have different fronts for literature, for education, for theater, for cinema, and then Douglas Estevam and Rafael Vilas Boas, they were two scholars that are from the movement that wrote some very beautiful and like how to say, accessible at the same time texts on the protagonism of rural workers in Brazilian cinema and theater, and then we came to understand a lot about what it is, theater, for the movement, for the organization of Movimento Sem Terra, and they knew that in the southeast of Pará, there's a very strong, the movement has a very strong connection with theater, and also in the south of Brazil. So we had basically in 2021-22, with the whole culture and economy of Brazil being completely dismantled, the movement was also suffering, of course, and then the pandemic. So they were not so articulated as they could be. But then these 10 actors in the southeast of Pará and some other actors in Porto Alegre were very active. The play that they were performing had just been put together, so we thought, let's work with them. I mean, in Pará, we didn't know it would be so hard to get to know a different area of Brazil, so we learned a lot also about our own culture, country, and history. The work is theirs. The work is theirs. It is a translation from their play into what we can understand of their play in moving image, but it's their text. It's really fascinating for me until now. I mean, it's the first time we're seeing the film, and I am completely hypnotized by how they own the text and how good they are as actors of their own story or of our history in this didactic way. And at the same time, it's embarrassing how we really are still performing that. No, at the same time, it's like, this is Brazil still today.
I don't know if you have something you want to add, Benji, but I think we're out of time. I need to hand it over to the audience. So I'm afraid we don't have time for too many questions, but if anyone, we can take like 2 or 3, I think. Andrew? You got the 2? If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. You have a question?
He does have a question.
Sorry.
Do you actually want to say something?
How do you film things that are so messed out?
Messed up?
So I think the question was, how do you film things? The question directly was when they are so messed up, but perhaps it could be expanded to when things are complicated.
Wow, that's a really complicated question. No one's ever asked that question before. Wow.
Yeah, facing the difficulties with difficulty, but yes, still many difficult things happen when we're doing that. I mean, Pedrinho can also talk about that. Maybe it's good to hear from Pedro a little bit of the challenges of making experimental cinema in Brazil, and especially now. I mean, we are working from 2015 to now. In 2016, 17, we had the president impeached. From that moment on, I mean, I don't know. I think it's important to think about in the industry of cinema, the circuit of professional art. So we are there. We are in between these fields, no? And it's difficult to find ourselves able to keep working when things are messed up. And it's also very difficult for the people we work with, to keep working when things are messed up. And I think there's a lot about that. That's part of the content of the work. I think we can only really survive when things are very messed up, when we are together and we share this. I mean, being together and maybe making art together is a way of facing the messed upness of it all.
Definitely. I mean, I think that's right. It's not messed up when you create this community. It's actually very well organized and very not uncomfortable, but like very protective kind of environment. What's messed up is the relationship to the oppression that comes from outside of these communities. That's forced on these different communities because of where they are or what they represent to someone else, So that's what's messed up. is the relationship.
Samuel, thank you for your question.
May I make a question to Pedro Sotero? Because then it's both to you, but I think his answer might be. Congratulations to all of you on the. I know all of these films separately, and to see them together today, I was so moved because and I was just realizing that in the middle of this narrative, temporal narrative arc, there is the Holy Tremor. Like that's the third film, and I remember you two at the time saying something like, "From then on, let it tremble," and it just it really did. But my question is, seeing the films together, and Pedro Sotero, who is your partner, you two guys' partner, and as DP, director of photography, how do you see them, how they evolved visually? How do you, seeing them together is, of course, there's different probably fundings, to be very direct, money involved, resources to make a film. So there's this difference between the first, from Faz que Vai in 2015 to a film made now. But how do you see them differently visually, seeing them together?
I think all the work, it's a lot about methodology and getting together with these artists that we work with. And I think things, I don't know rationally how they evolved, but yeah, they start evolving since Faz que Vai, the Frevo film. Bárbara talked a lot how we want to do this portrait and portray this generation. And it's very essential. It's mainly, they are portraits that we make of artists that we want to work with, that we got interest, that we think that there's something, we get a feeling that's something important to dialogue with. And meeting Bárbara and Benjamin, it was a big transition in my career, as I work as a cinematographer in the film industry. And then I met Bárbara, I knew Bárbara work as a photographer, still photographer, and I was a very big fan of it because it intrigued me, like how she saw Brazil and how these portraits were so honest and how she could get that on that image. And I was really interested in her work. And so when she invited me to work with them, they invited me to work with them. I said, of course, I want to work with you. Like, I want to learn with you. I want to learn, how do you get these people to feel so comfortable in front of a camera that I don't know how to do? And then we started this in Faz que Vai, and it started extending. And I think there's one thing that we spend a lot of time with people, really different with these artists, before we shoot. Like in the film industry, I get like very short time of pre-production and very objective. And with Bárbara, that's the work, in Benjamin, this work of in-between things allows me to get a long time with these artists and get to know them and get to know how they want to be portrayed and how to it's the main thing that I learned with them is like is the main quality of a photographer is the listening part of it. Is to listen to people, is like you learn a lot of it, and you can learn how to make the correct way, because you just want to, not, I don't know, the correct is not, but the way they want to be portrayed. And I think the films evolve. Yeah, each film, it has its own particularities on how the involvement is and happens. Like in the Frevo film, we got like this long time with them rehearsing and watching them practice and going to their work during the day and work during the night. And then we get to something. And it was quite simple because we had like, very low budget, but the simplicity of it is the beauty of it also, I think. It's not because you have a bigger structure, you can make a better film, but you can, work with different ferramentas, tools of how to create with people. And I think each group asks for something different and how they want to be portrayed. And I think our guide is the relation that's created during this process. So we spend, with Terremoto Santo, we went to this gravadora, to record of singers, and we stayed there for many days, like seeing the singers and seeing which people would like to interact and talk to us and interview them, and then we find the people who wanted to be with us in the film, and then we started to see these songs that they want to sing, and then okay, and where do you want to sing this song, and then we start building the image of the film in the process and together with the artists. And how it evolved during this time, I think it's in the image. I cannot say you something like direct in how it evolved, but it's about the methodology that is evolving on each work and in the process of working with the artists.
Thank you so much.
I'm so sorry to have to cut the question and answer short. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. Our speakers are generous people, as you can already tell, and so they will be here for a couple of moments afterwards in case you have additional questions. We also are ending now to give you the opportunity, should you desire, to go up and see the work itself. It's on the 3rd floor. We would welcome all of you to stay and view these incredible films. So please, a big round of applause. Thank you to all of our artists and curators.